Hey everybody, welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, it's theclinicaltrialsguru.com. I'm joined by one of my study coordinators, Rami. How's it going, Rami?
Good.
And Rami's been a study coordinator for how long now?
Like 3 years.
3 years. Okay, so 3 years. I brought him on because this week I've been doing a longer than 20-minute video every day because I'm preparing for the holiday season. I'm going to be going away for 2 weeks, so we're not going to have that much content on YouTube, but you're going to have all these videos to catch up on. And that's why I'm making them longer on purpose this week. So, Rami is here because he's a study coordinator, an experienced study coordinator. Basically, you've been running an entire research clinic on your own for the majority of the time you've been here, right?
Yes,
Until
yes.
recently.
Yes.
Recently, we brought in some extra coordinators, so now the workload's being more spread out. But since startup of this site until very recently, you've been doing everything, right?
Yes.
So it's good to bring you here because we are getting questions about site operations, and we're going to try to make this. Thank you, Emily. We're going to try to make this as concise as possible in a 20-minute or so video. So
Okay.
I guess the best way to do this, because I've done a 2-hour video on Introduction to Clinical Research, I kind of talk about some of the main visits, like screening visit, baseline. What we're going to go through is go through the entire process at the site level of what happens, how do you get a study, first of all, and then when you get that study, like what visits do the monitors come at, like a site selection visit, site initiation visit, what happens at these visits, and then we go through screening, recruiting patients, and then the back end of everything, right?
Okay.
So let's start with the first. Usually we get a study. That's not your responsibility. Typically the study coordinator, it's not their role to obtain studies. It's someone like myself or site owner or PI to obtain a study. But once you get that CDA, then we get the protocol synopsis, right?
Yes.
Then you'll read the protocol synopsis, right? And then you'll kind of give the doctor, the PI, they're always busy, right? Our PIs here, they don't have much time,
Yes.
right? And let's face it, 90%.
I think in all sites, not only here.
All sites, like 90% of sites, PIs have very little time.
Yes.
And my experience is at most sites, and I've heard this from monitors, the monitors say they're lucky to see the PI for even 5 minutes
Yes.
at a visit,
That's
right? So it's actually like your job, the job of the study coordinator, to pretty much give the PI a brief overview of the synopsis,
Sure.
even more brief than the synopsis, so that they're prepared at the site selection visit to be able to talk about the study. And most PIs do a really good job because they can start talking medically about things. Like if they're interested in the particular investigational product, they can spend a lot of time talking about that, and they can kind of show their interest in the study and in the drug by talking about the study from a clinical perspective. And the monitors don't really care about that. I mean, they like to see that the doctor's interested, but the monitors at the site selection visit want to make sure that the site is capable of handling the trial.
That's good.
So what happens after the CDA, then we do the feasibility survey, which again Rami doesn't do. I'll usually do it, or we'll have team members do the feasibility surveys to see if the site actually has the capabilities, at least on paper, to conduct a trial. If that goes well, then they usually do what? They call you?
Yeah, they call to schedule the site selection visit.
Site selection visit. And how soon do they want to set this visit up? I know it varies, but usually it's what, within 2 weeks?
Usually like 2-3 weeks.
2-3 weeks?
Maximum, yeah.
What's the longest you've scheduled one for?
Like 3 weeks. Maximum.
3 weeks, okay. So then they'll come out, then it's your job to let the PI know.
Yes.
And we just saw Emily leave. Emily's the one who's responsible for our PI's schedule. So we don't actually tell the PI because he's not there all the time, or he might be busy with patients.
Yes.
We tell Emily, who will then look at his schedule and block out how much time?
It depends, but it is like 30 to 45 minutes for the site selection visit and site initiation visit.
Okay, yeah. So then they come in for the site selection visit. they being the monitor, will talk to us. Sometimes I'll be here, right?
Yes.
So usually you'll have the coordinator here, you'll have any research assistants here, you'll have like maybe a site manager here, someone doing QA. Then you'll get the PI to come in. But the site selection visit usually takes 2 hours,
Yes.
and the PI may only have 30 minutes. So what we do, we tell the monitor when they get here, hey, the PI is going to come at this time, he's got 30 minutes, let's take care of everything else first, and then you can go through, you being the monitor, go through what you need to get through with the PI, then he'll leave, and then you could finish, right?
Yeah, that's what we are doing exactly.
That's exactly what
Yes.
we're doing, right?
Yes.
And that's by design, because we've got it down to a science, and I think most sites do this too. So if you don't want the monitor just sitting around waiting until the PI comes
Yeah.
for him or her to start the entire site selection visit, they can
No,
get
it's
started.
just a waste of time. So
It's a waste of time,
Yeah.
right? So it's better to get started
yes.
with some of the mundane questions that they ask, especially when it comes to recruitment. They can ask the coordinator that. They can ask the coordinator when your last GCP is,
Yes.
right? So what kind of things do they ask you at the site selection visit?
They ask about the recruitment materials. They have to take a tour in the site, so they have to check the equipment, the storage, the drug room.
So what do they look at in the site tour?
They looked at everything, like the equipments. They looked at the EKGs, like the examination room, examination table, the draw chairs for the blood drawing. They look at the drug room if we have like double locked room for the drug for storage storing the drugs. Also, they check for the calibration for all the equipments we have in the
That's
site.
important,
Yeah.
calibration.
So we have to have everything is calibrated like every year or every 6 months.
And then they tend to ask you specific questions like, when was your last GCP training?
yes,
What EDC platforms, electronic data capture system, have you used? Do you have experience with? How quickly do you enter data after a visit, right?
yeah, it should be mostly it should be like 1 to 3 days maximum.
Right, 24 to 72 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. They'll also ask you about your process of consent. Have they ever asked for SOPs?
Yes.
Yeah. So then what do? You just email them?
No, I just explain to them what we're gonna do in the informed consent process. So we give the informed
Okay.
consent to the patient and give him like plenty of time to read everything and ask questions. If he have any questions, we have to answer all the questions. And then after that, the patient signs the informed consent.
Yes.
And then he offered a copy we offered him to give him a copy for his records.
So that's the process of consent. So that's pretty much what a site selection visit entails. And then the PI will come in, hopefully right on time, right on cue. Then they could get into the actual protocol, where the
Yes.
monitor will present the protocol or the protocol overview to the PI. Then they'll confirm with the PI whether what we said we can do on the feasibility survey is what he or she thinks we can do. Most PIs will say yes, and then they'll leave, and then the monitor will maybe ask you a few other things,
That's right.
and then
And,
go.
that's-
right? Okay, so that's site selection visit. Now let's say that went well.
Okay.
A few weeks later, they'll call you or they'll
For the
email
site
you
Initiation visit, yes.
for the SIV,
Yes.
site initiation visit. So you've been accepted, and now in between when the site selection visit and the site initiation visit, they will give you regulatory documents
Yes,
and contract and budget.
that's right.
So when you get a contract and budget, because Rami is the study coordinator, he forwards it to me or Chris,
Yes.
unless we're already getting it directly. Because on the feasibility survey, you put down who is going to be doing that, right? And then they'll send you the regulatory stuff, right?
That's right.
Regulatory startup.
Yes.
And what does that entail, just really quickly?
Mostly the financial disclosures, the 1572. There are some documents we need to submit to the IRP, so we need to fill this out and submit it to the IRP. We have to send them all the CVs and medical license for the PI and sub-I, and all the other CVs for the study coordinators, for recruiters, for everyone in the site.
Mm-hmm.
The GCP training, we have to send
GCP
them
training.
a copy of the GCP
And the
training
IRB submission.
and IRP support. Yes.
And so that needs to get done before they come for the site initiation
Yes.
visit. Same with budget and contract. Because they don't want to waste time. When they do come do the site initiation visit, they want to see that everything's done
That's right.
so that you can start screening now. And theoretically you can start screening the next day if you wanted to, right?
Mostly yes.
So, and also in between the SSV and the SIV, once you're accepted, you'll usually receive an acceptance letter. Or if you weren't, a letter describing why you were not accepted into the study.
That's right.
They'll start sending lab kits and all the study
Yes.
supplies that you'll need, like EKG machines.
Yeah, I have to get everything before the site initiation visit. So
Everything,
you
right?
have to make sure that everything is received by the site. I have all access to the EDC, IVRS, and IRB and everything.
All the
for site
vendors,
initiation visit.
yeah. And then they'll send also the investigational product.
Yes,
Then you need to start, from the day that you get it, you need to start keeping the temperature log for
that's
it,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then the SIV comes, site initiation visit, and just really briefly, what happens there?
And site initiation visit,
Yeah,
they just make sure that everything is done. I have all the lab kits, I have the study drug, I have all access to all sites like IVRS, like EDC, IRB, everything. So once you have everything ready, so the site is good to go for screening. So maybe, as you said, like next day we can
The next
screen
day,
subjects.
yeah.
Yes.
and we've done that,
Yes.
last week.
Yeah.
We screened 10
Yes.
in
And
one
the
day.
next- Yeah, that's right.
That's right, and we were very aggressive on that study.
Yeah.
Yeah. We already need to redo the budget,
That's
to
right.
ask for 10
Yeah,
more.
because we need to request for like 10 more or something.
Hmm. So, screening visit comes, and I've done this, but people like to hear from someone else from time to time. I mean, you don't need to go into detail, but what happens at a screening visit?
The screening visits, the patient comes. We called him before about this is the recruiter part. They talk to the patient and give him like
whole
a brief
nother
description
topic on
about the
recruitment, yeah.
study and this stuff. And then he comes here. We give him the informal consent. We put him in a private room like this. So
And
he
so the
can-
coordinator doesn't really do too much recruitment. right.
No, we have someone who's taking care of
Yeah,
the
we have
recruitment.
someone here, and most sites do, they have, but sometimes the coordinators do all
Yeah, I
this.
did this before
Okay,
the recruitment
right,
comes here,
right.
but I was doing everything. So
Before you had help, you were doing all
Yes.
this. Yeah, that's right. Okay, and then screening, so they'll do the informed consent.
yes, and
And
then
then-
once he signs the informal consent,
Mhm.
we start doing the assessments depending on the protocol. What we start with, mostly we start with the vital signs and
Right.
EKG, physical examination, and then if it is like a psychiatric study, so we have to do the assessments for the psychiatry study.
All the assessments.
Yes,
And another important thing we forgot to mention is you have to create the source documents.
yes,
And that's actually, ideally, you want those created before the site initiation visit so that the monitor can look at them and
Yes.
say, okay, here's our source docs. Basically, a source doc is where you are actually collecting the study data before you put it in the EDC. So a typical way to do this is to ask for a screenshot of the EDC so that you can create the source docs. And we use Intralinks VIA, so we
That's
already
right.
have generic source docs in there.
yeah,
And
we
we
can
could
just
just
edit it. Yeah,
Edit them, like each protocol is different, so we can pull things out, put other things in.
that's right.
And you'll create a source doc for every visit. You'll have a screening
Yes.
source, baseline. Okay, so screening comes in, patient comes in, you do the consent. They don't receive drug at this visit.
No,
And patient goes home, right? You pay him
yes.
or her. They go home. Now what do? You wait on labs and
Yeah, we have to wait for the lab results, and if we for some studies we do like video recording, so we have to wait for like the center rater to give us like if the patient meets the criteria or not, and then we have to review all the inclusion exclusion criteria. If the patient meets all the inclusion exclusion criteria, then we can schedule the randomization visit, and it depends on the protocol. Sometimes it's like 2 weeks or 1 month, like
Right.
60 days, so
Right.
depending on the protocol. So then we schedule the randomization visit, and the patient comes, and we do the same assessments or whatever required by the protocol. We do the assessments, we do the EKG, blood labs, and this
and
stuff.
so at randomization visit
And
you
then
will
the-
use the
Yeah, we dispense the study drugs as
Study
a randomization visit,
Mhm.
and mostly they require him to get the first dose at the site under observation. So we give
First
him the
dose
first dose
at the
at
day of
site.
visit.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then he continued taking the medication at home. So
Mhm. And we're using source docs that we created for the
for
randomization visit.
Yes.
And then what do? You look at when their next
Yeah.
visit is. Usually the IVRS will tell you.
Yeah, the IVRS, they give me like a window.
Yeah.
Mostly it is like plus or minus 3 days.
Okay.
So it give me the target day plus or minus 3 days, so I can work on these days, so I can get him in the window.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then it goes into however many visits the study entails.
Yes, once
Right.
he's randomized, if he doesn't have any adverse events or any serious adverse events that may withdraw him from the study, so we just have to schedule all the visits, all the coming visits after the randomization visit.
And then let's talk about adverse events and serious adverse events. So let's say patient calls you and says, "Hey, I have a headache." That's an adverse event. So you'll document that.
Yes.
Patient called, adverse event. EDC, but it's not serious,
Yeah.
right? But when is it serious?
If it requires like hospitalization, so in this case we have to stop the study drug and notify the PI, and the IRB should be notified like within 24 hours of the serious adverse events. So that's what we do for the serious adverse events.
And what do you do when a patient calls and says, hey, I don't really want to do this study anymore?
It's up to him. So if he wants to withdraw any time from the study, so he can do that.
Right.
And actually the ICF says this, informed consent, it says this.
They
If you
can
want
withdraw
to withdraw from the study or discontinue at any time, so we can do this.
Now, oftentimes in the psychiatric trials that we do, or just any trials in general, sometimes you want to ask why, and maybe there's a way you could work with them and convince them to continue. Sponsors often try to have us do that. But if they really, if there is no why, they don't have to say why.
That's right.
But there always is a possibility that they can continue if you're willing to work with them. And maybe you can get some kind of waiver from the sponsor.
That's right.
If they want to continue on a certain med that the protocol doesn't allow. Always check with your sponsor first, and then if there really is no option, then yeah, you have to withdraw them, right?
That's right.
So then they have the option to come in for an early termination visit.
Yes, in this case,
Right.
yes.
So basically you do all the procedures in that
Yeah,
visit.
almost everything. So,
Safety follow-up?
Yes.
And then they return their IP at every visit. That's one thing we left out. So every new visit, they bring back their investigational product from the previous visit.
Yes.
And then you have to do, the coordinator,
The
drug accountability,
yes.
right?
Yeah, we have to do this at each visit. He brings old medication, and then we dispense the new one at the visit.
And you have
then
to
we
check
do the
compliance.
drug accountability to
Yeah.
see the compliance of the patient.
And if they're not compliant, what do you do?
If he's not compliant, depending on the protocol, because sometimes they say like the patient is not compliant and he has to be like screen failed or whatever the protocol
Right.
says about the drug compliance.
Right.
Because some of them require like 100%, some of them require like 75% compliance, so depending on the protocol.
And whenever there's a doubt, you just call your monitor first.
Yes,
Right.
we have to check with the monitor and see that the patient is not compliant or he missed like how many doses he lost,
Yeah.
he missed, and
Because the worst thing you want to do is, like, if you discover they're not compliant and the protocol's not okay with that, but you continue to study anyways, then the monitor catches that, and you may not even get paid for those other visits.
yeah, actually it will not be good, so we have to notify them about something like this.
Right.
Once I see that the patient is not compliant, I have to notify them that the patient, this is the compliance of the patient, what will be the next step, if he can continue, if he has to be withdrawn from the study.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you have site closeout visit. So
Yes.
at the end of the study, all queries are answered. We didn't even talk about entering data, just a little bit. But you'll get queries routinely in the EDC.
Yes,
You'll have to go in and correct them, and if you don't, the monitor calls you.
that's right.
Right, so then the closeout visit. What do they do at a closeout visit?
As a closeout visit, so they have to return the unused study drug.
Mm-hmm.
And actually the return of the study drugs also, all the kits for the
Right.
study drug kits
Right.
have to be returned to the sponsor. They have to have everything signed by the PI, the drug accountability, all the logs like enrollment, screening,
Delegation
and,
log.
yeah, delegation log, and everything has to be signed by the PI.
Do you put an end date for every staff member?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, at
That's
the end of the study, we have to put the end date for each one in the study.
Mhm.
So, and it has to be signed by the PI, and then they collect the originals for this one.
And then they usually want to meet with the PI at the closeout visit.
You can say mostly, yes.
Mostly.
Yeah.
And sometimes PIs are busy and they don't have time.
Yeah, in this case, I think they can call him, but they have to have everything signed as a closeout visit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So there's really no way around that. The PI has
Yeah.
to come in. Okay. Are we missing anything else? Site operations? Budgets and contracts I've done videos on.
Yeah.
And recruitment a whole nother video on, but that just gives you an idea of just the basic site operations in a nutshell. Right?
Yes.
Thank you, Rami.
Thank you.
Good stuff, man. Thank you guys for watching. This is Dan and Rami from theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Take care.
Thank you.
Good job, man.